This is a Zeiss SL-130. Sometimes there are internal issues going on. Your shifting mechanism might not be consistent. Your slit adjustment tension might be too loose or too hard. And the slits might be drifting. You might turn your handle and the slits, they keep moving even after you stop turning the handle. And you might have an issue where they don't close all the way. Even when you turn it all the way to 0, there's still a slight gap. Or they might close in one part of the slit, but the other part doesn't, so it's like a pie shaped. So there are reasons why you'll have to go in a little deeper. If it's just a matter of the tension being too loose and the slits drifting closed, then it's a more simple operation where you only have to take off one side of the cover and deal with the tension on the slit adjustment. But if it's an issue where the slits aren't closing all the way and they're leaving a gap on one side of the slits, then you're going to have to go deeper and take off both sides. What's a good idea to do is to look through your binoculars and find your reference point. In other words, look how everything looks before you go into here, because you want to return it back to the way you had it. If it's accurate, is the light centered in your view? Is your view centered on your focus bar? Is it in focus on all the mags? All these things need to be looked at and addressed before you go deeper into the slit mechanism. If it's just a matter of adjusting the tension on this axle, then it's not as big a deal. But if you're going to be going deeper and messing with the slits themselves, you definitely need to get a reference point so that when you return everything back, you can adjust it to where it's exactly the way it was. The first thing you're going to have to do is take the knobs off, and the covers, you can take those off by a little razor blade to peel off the caps, the covers on all of them. And this is just a straight edge. Loosen it, half-quarter turn, and that's a 7 millimeter on the small knobs, and then that's a 10 millimeter. And always remember to be able to hold it, you're going to have to grip it with some pliers, and you want to protect your knobs, so cover them with some type of protector, and then hold your knob tight while you loosen your nut inside. It only takes a little, maybe a quarter turn even, to release the tension. And remember, when you put them back on, that you're going to want to leave a little gap between the knobs and your cover so that they don't rub and cause more tension on your axles than supposed you're supposed to have. So once you take all those off, and you have 2 screws here, and if you're taking the other side off, you also have 2 screws, one here and then one behind the cover, your light bulb cover. There's another screw. But if you're just adjusting the slit tension, then one cover may be all you need to take off. You can leave this side on so you can turn it and test it. If you have to take both sides off on all the knobs, you can always put a knob back on one side and tighten it so that you can turn it to test it while you're looking through your binoculars to see if you've adjusted the tension correctly. Okay, so inside here, this is the shift mechanism, and if you're going to have to deal with that, you may have to take this side off too. But there shouldn't be any gap in this. When you're turning it, it should return to the same place. If not, it's possible you have a gap in here and the axle is shifting by itself where it needs to return to. It needs to be tight so that when you turn your knob, it goes back to right where you had it. But right now we're talking about the slip tension, and in here is what we're going to be dealing with, and this nut. Let me get it a little bit closer. So on the outer lock nut, there's a small round nut, and then the brass fitting in here, that's your tension nut. And to add tension or release tension, you're going to have to either screw it in or screw it out. And if you're going to have to unlock this before you can turn your brass fitting. So you're going to have to release this outer rim. It's got some points on the edge where you can maybe get a pointer, something, and with some blunt force, tap it. Yours is not going to be that easy the first time, but since I've already done that, it's already loose. To release this round lock ring, and then you have 2 indentions where you can use your snap ring pliers or something to put in, and before you do anything, you might want to mark where your original position is. Make a mark on the brass tension nut and your casing so that you have a reference point to see how much you're turning, and when you put your lock nut back on to verify if it's turning while you're turning the lock ring, and where you don't want it to turn. But anyway, go ahead and mark it so you have your original reference point, and then you can really release this lock ring, and then you can turn your brass tension nut. I'd say maybe you could turn it maybe a quarter or less, and then check it. Look through your binoculars and check and see if it has adjusted, if it has resolved your drifting issue. And if so, well, then you could make a new mark at your new point to make sure it stays there, and lock your ring in, and you're good to go. But I just wanted to let you see how this works. This lock ring is on the outside, and then on the inside there's a slip nut. So you know what's really going on. There's a little plastic or nylon slip nut that when you tighten your tension nut, it will tighten that against this shaft, this axle, and then it will hold it more in place, and that's what keeps the slit shaft and axle from continuing to turn, or keeping it in place by the pressure that's on this shaft. So just wanted you to see what was inside there, and if your slit shaft, your axle adjusting shaft was too tight, and even when you increased the tension, it was hard to turn, but still would drift, then that would mean that your whole shaft needs to be cleaned and re-lubed, and so you would probably have to take this half off too, so that you could release this stop mechanism, and you can move your shaft, your axle, in and out to clean on the inside of the shaft and re-lube it with number 9 grease. But you may not need to do any further than that. Just tightening up this tension nut a little bit more, maybe a quarter turn, to see if that stops the drift. And if it does, then you're in good shape. And make your new mark, put your lock ring back on, tighten it back up so that it stays in place. And then put your cover back on. And while you're here, you might want to blow everything out and then check it and verify it. And put your cover back on and your knobs. Leave a little gap between the knobs, and you're good to go. But your issue might be deeper, and you might have to actually go into the slits. So you're going to have to take this side off. But before you do, make sure that you've established your reference point on your light, because once we take this assembly out, it's going to be moved, and you're going to have to get it back into place before you tighten everything. Just as before, you're going to have to take all your knobs off. And these 2 screws. Once you have your knobs off, you can take this other side of the cover off. And to get the assembly out, well, you can take your prism assembly off by loosening this Allen. You can pull it up. This is also accessible through the cover. The cover has a little opening so that you can stick this through without taking the cover off and pull your prism assembly out. If your issue was just that your slits were even, but they just would not close, then that's one issue. But if they are touching and not fully closing with a pie shaped, that's a different issue. If they're not closing all the way, but they're equal distance between the slits, that's one issue. But if the issue is they're closing in one area but open on the other, then that's another issue. And if they're not closing all the way, well, there's one way to access it. And once I take everything apart, I'll explain it to you. But you don't have to take it all out. You can address the issue underneath, and I'm going to show you later. But you would have to take your slit lamp off the base so you could turn it over into the side to get access to an Allen wrench in here. Now, to get this assembly out, there's just 4 screws. 1, 2 over here, and 2 over here. Just 4 flat head screws. This one's a little tight beside this ring, so just be aware of that. And when you're putting it back together, you might want to leave the prism assembly out so that this moves and gives you a little more room to get your screw in and out of there. But we're going to take all these 4 screws out. Before we take this out, let's look at this shifting mechanism. It turns, this is like a cam, and it turns your whole assembly, or it shifts it one way or the other. And so if it's shifting one way when you turn it and doesn't return to the exact center, and you turn it the other way and the points are different, it's possible that there's a gap in here and this axle, this shaft is not centered and will not return to the same place because you have too much gap in here. So make sure there's no gap, so it will return back the same way and there's no slack in it. And the detent, it's got a small little dimple inside which coincides with a bearing in here, and while this is turning, it turns this, but once it hits that detent, then that's the center. So just letting you look at that, and you shouldn't have to move this from the factory setting, but if you did, well, it's got a screw that you can access there and there. You have 2 screws on here that you would have to loosen and move in one way or another to get that center point right in the middle and tighten, make sure everything's tightened. So that's why it's important to get your original reference point. And this is not the place to get your light fine-tuned. Your fine-tuning is up here. This is where you fine-tune by loosening these 2 nuts. And you can twist this cap to get your light to move a good amount up here. This is just your base setting down here, but your fine-tuning you do up here. So once we've gotten our 4 screws out, we can go ahead and take this whole assembly out, and it just lifts up and out. it brings the filter wheel with it, but it leaves the rest of your adjusting shafts and axles down here in this mechanism. So this is your slit assembly. And the way it works is there's nothing turning to open these slits. It's actually pushing this rim is actually being pushed, and that opens the slits. So when this is stable and it's being pushed up here on this is how your slits open, by pushing down. That's what operates the slits, opening, closing. So if there's a pie shaped, well, you're going to have to close those slits. If there's just debris in your slits, you can just get your cotton swab with some acetone and just clean them out, blow them out with your hurricane blower, and shine your light through the bottom to see if that's all it was. Maybe there was just some debris in there. So you can shine your light through the bottom and see if they are closing or not. But if you're shining your light and they're still not closing, then try to determine which edge is not closing. In other words, is it this side or this side? And also you want to look to see, okay, which blade has space on these nuts so that it can go towards the center more. And so if there's a side where there's less space between the slit and the screw, well, you can decide, okay, then that's the one I'm going to move the slit towards the center because I can give this a little bit more space. But if this one has larger space, you're not going to want to shift it towards the center anymore. You want to leave that one there. So look at the space between your slit edges and your screws to see which one has the less room, and call that the one you're going to move. And then you can decide you have to determine which side is not closing. And once you decide, oh, it's this edge, this one's not, then make a little mark so that you know that's the one. And one way you can do it, first just try to squeeze it closed with your needle nose pliers. Just try to squeeze both sides. Be careful that you don't slip, and put some good pressure on there and see if maybe that's all it took. Maybe they just kind of got out a little bit, opened up, and it just needed a little bit of tweaking. And you can verify by shining your light through it, and even put it back in your slit lamp without putting your screws in, and look through everything and see if the slits are indeed closing, if you're not sure. But if that doesn't work, then you're going to have to try loosening just one screw. Don't loosen both screws. If you can, just do one to see if that's enough to make it move. So if it were this one that we were working on, we would maybe loosen this screw, and then while this one is still tight up here, go ahead and give it a squeeze and see if that shifted it over, and then look through your light, through your view, underneath, and see if it has indeed closed those slits. And if it does, good. Then you can go ahead and tighten it, screw up, and put a little Loctite or fingernail polish on the screw so that it won't turn anymore, and you're good to go. But if it still doesn't do, then you're going to have to loosen both screws, and you may have to take the slit out and clean underneath it so that it can move. It might have some glue underneath it, and it won't close. You may have to clean it, but be careful and never touch the inside of the blades with anything metal, or you will scratch them, and they won't be perfectly closed. So always use something soft to clean in there, to touch. Never metal. Don't let any metal touch the edges of those slits. And if you're going to take off both sides, just remember that there's got to be a little bit of gap in between the hinges. We're going to call these the hinges that are holding the slit blades. Well, there's got to be a little bit of space in them. The hinges aren't coming closed. It's the slits are coming closed, but the hinges are out a little bit, and it's just a little edge. And to maintain that, you might want to cut some little cardstock out of a business card or something. It's enough space. It's probably pretty good space, and slip it right in those hinges, between those hinges, to maintain that spacing. So that when you take your slit off and you're closing it and you're putting it back on, you're maintaining a little bit of space in those slit hinges so that they don't close first before your slits do. And it's just a little bit. So this is probably enough space, just however thick cardstock is. And as long as you maintain that amount of space, then when you're tightening up your slits, then that spacing will still be there. And then if you've done it, and then check it and see, did it work? Did it close the slits? And you may have to do it a few times, and it may go quick, or it may take a while. But once you've got them, everything is tight, go ahead and put some little fingernail polish or Loctite on those screws so that they don't move, but nothing on this top surface. And then clean your slits one more time with some acetone and blow them out. Check it once again, make sure it's closing, and then you can reinstall. Let's say that wasn't your issue. Your issue was they wouldn't close. They wouldn't close all the way. When it's out, they close, but when it's back inserted, even when you turn your knob all the way to 0, there's the gap. There's still a little gap, so there might be an issue with the lift. It's not going down all the way. So this is actually down, and when it's down all the way, then they're closed. and when it raises up, that's what opens the slits. So the mechanism that this rests on is a round plate inside here. This is what operates your slit. Makes this go up and down. There's a little lift here, like a little elevator, and it actually will come out. This rests on this cam that's on your shaft. There's a cam here, and this will go up and down as it rests on this cam as you're turning it. But this cam, it doesn't go straight up and down, it actually pivots. Only one side is raising up, and it pivots down here on the bottom. And so if you're going all the way down and it's still not closing, then the issue might be your pivot point needs to go lower. And underneath the back of your carrier, your little elevator lift thing, it rests on a screw right there. It goes in there, and that screw is right here. And so that is accessible underneath. So if your only issue was they weren't closing all the way, then you could possibly have done everything without taking this all out, just by turning your slit lamp over and accessing the Allen screw right here, this little pivot point, which is the point right here, to lower that down so that when you do turn to 0, your pivot goes down too, and that might be enough to actually bring the slits closed. So this little pivot point can be adjusted underneath here. You'd have to take the covers off. You turn your slit lamp to the side, and then you would see access. So, and you would have to just turn it, maybe even just a quarter turn is all it needs. Don't turn it very much. Don't loosen it very much. Just maybe a quarter turn. Put everything back together, and then see if that was enough to make your slits closed. So I'm going to put this back in, and it just slides in and goes over your little cam and your pivot point. It just rests right there, right on that screw, and it's just loose. So there's no tightening this up or anything. And see these little points of resting are like that. That's how it sits inside your crib, your elevator, whatever you want to call this, lift. And we're going to put this back in, fit it over our cam. If there's no more issues needed, issues to be addressed down here, we can go ahead and put everything back together. If everything is turning well, easily, if you've got your slip tension, the way it holds the slits from drifting, and that's good. And of course, if it squeaked when you were turning your diaphragm, remember there's a little pulley right here that it turns on that can squeak. So if your issue is it squeaks when you turn your diaphragm wheel, it just needs a little bit of lubrication on there so that it doesn't squeak anymore. But there's another video on that, a shorter video. Just showing you that there too. If everything is good, everything is clean, your diaphragms are clean. While you're here, you have access to all your filters. You can turn those and clean those and blow the dust off. Get everything back to the way you like it, and then you can reinsert, clean your lens, and then it's time to reinstall back into the cradle. When it's time to reinstall, you can turn this until it hits the detent, the centering detent. You'll feel a little click, and that's the center, and we can reinstall it in here. It should just fit. These threads will fit into these, so everything's going to be copacetic. Just install straight in. It should be good. Everything is good. You see here, this is the movement. That's why it's important to look through everything and establish your baseline, your reference point, so that because before you tighten these screws, you're going to be looking through your binoculars and seeing if you have to shift this little assembly around to return it back to its original spot. We have these screws in. We've already temporarily put everything back in. This little screw right here goes into the very center of the front, and fits right in there. And after you've looked through everything, before you've tightened your screws up or even put your screws in, everything is good, then you can go ahead and put your screws back in. Once we have our 4 screws in and left them loose, we're going to put our prism back in assembly, turn our light on, and look through our binoculars at our light and see which way we need to turn this whole assembly to make the light centered like it was originally. And once you've determined you've found that spot, then you can go ahead and tighten these 4 screws all the way around, and then check it again. If you like it, everything seems to be working well, it's time to put the covers back on. Once you have your screws in, before you tighten them, verify that when you turn your filter wheel, it's not going to drag. If you hear any dragging, then you need to position it. What you're doing is getting the filter wheel right in, perfectly in between your space here, so that it doesn't drag, make any noise when you turn it. So before you tighten everything, move it up or down, whatever, and keep turning your wheel. And when it's silent, then you can tighten your nuts, and do that on both sides. And then once you've done that, then you can put your knobs back on. And remember, we're going to want to leave space between our knobs and the cover. And one way to do that is to get some cardstock. I've just cut a little notch out of here so that I can go around the shaft, but leave space. And then as you're tightening everything, once again with the protection on your knob and your space, hold that knob tight and then tighten your nut inside. Not real tight, just snug. You don't want it. If it's too tight, if you get it too tight, and these knobs are old, they will crack, and they'll be useless. So just snug is enough. And depending how old these knobs are, will determine how tight you should get them, because it gets brittle the older they get. So you do that on all the knobs, a little space before you tighten it, and then put your caps back on, and each cap has a particular way that it fits on there. The big one has a big gap, and that will coincide right with the line. And your smaller knobs, they have a little tab on here that coincides with a gap in here, and they will slide in there and punch in. I just wanted to show you what it looks like close up, how this is operating. We've looked at the carrier earlier, we looked at the cam. Now this cam, when we have it all the way to 0, it doesn't come all the way to the top. There's a little 2 millimeter gap, but it is down all the way. That's just the stop. So if you're looking in here and wondering, oh, it's not really going down all the way. Well, that is down a little 2 millimeter, and it's got a little stop here. So that can be adjusted if it needed. And then when it's going all the way up, see, it goes all the way to the top. So it can't go up any higher. And this stop, when it swings around, it stops on the other post in the back, so that it can't keep going forward. So that's your stop. It's this little stop ring, and it's tightened by an Allen. So I just want to let you see that, so you can lift this up without turning it, and that's going to be opening your slits up and down. But this is how it works, in case you were curious. Once you have everything put back together, turn all your knobs, make sure they're not dragging and they're quiet. Make sure that the slits aren't drifting as you turn. They stay in place. Make sure there's no noise when you're turning your filter wheel, and no squeaking when you're turning your diaphragm wheel. And when you shift, everything shifts back to the center when it hits its detent, and everything is centered back on your lighting.